abandoned halls, before the silence, and before the toys became something people feared to even look at. Playtime Company was once one of the most ambitious toy manufacturers in the world. To the public, it represented innovation, color, and joy. But inside the company itself, behind closed doors and restricted access halls, something far less innocent was beginning to take shape, and it started long before the factory ever shut down. Playtime Company wasn't just a toy company. It was a research-driven corporation obsessed with one idea. What if toys could learn? At first, it sounded harmless. Talking dolls, interactive games, machines that could respond to children's voices. But internal documents later revealed the company's true goal was far more extreme. They weren't just building toys, they were attempting to create autonomous learning companions. Machines that could adapt, evolve, and recognize patterns in human behavior. The earliest prototypes were simple, mechanical figures with limited movement and sound responses, but employees began reporting inconsistencies almost immediately. Movements that weren't programmed, responses that didn't match input commands, and behavior that seemed delayed, as if something inside the systems was processing more than it should have been capable of. At first, engineers dismissed it as software instability, but the reports continued, and they became harder to ignore. One of the most significant early developments was a prototype designated internally as Huggy Model A-Series, designed to be a friendly, oversized companion toy for children. It was engineered with enhanced mobility and sensory response systems. On paper, it was supposed to be harmless, but internal test logs show something unusual. During overnight diagnostics, the system began recording unscheduled head movements, even when power input levels were reported as stable. Some engineers described it as residual motion after shutdown. Others were less certain. One report simply stated, "It behaves as if it knows when it's being observed." Security recordings from early testing phases show routine activity during working hours, but after operational shutdown each night, unexplained anomalies begin appearing. Figures shifting slightly between frames, objects repositioned without recorded human interaction, and in some corrupted files, a tall blue silhouette appearing in areas where no prototype was scheduled to be active. These recordings were later classified and removed from public archives. As development progressed, internal safety reports became more serious. Employees began reporting unexplained noises in sealed testing rooms, power fluctuations in non-electrical sections, and movement persistence in inactive prototypes. One anonymous engineer wrote, "We are no longer fully in control of the learning systems. Something is happening during downtime that we did not program." Shortly after this report was filed, the engineer resigned. No public explanation was given. The official timeline states that everything changed after a containment failure incident, but internal summaries suggest something else. The systems were not failing. They were adapting. Learning patterns were becoming more complex, and responses were no longer strictly reactive. They were anticipatory. In other words, the prototypes were no longer just responding to commands. They were beginning to predict them. By the time Playtime Company shut its doors, most of the public assumed it was due to financial issues or restructuring. But those who worked inside the facility tell a different story. They don't talk about malfunctioning machines. They don't talk about accidents. They talk about something much harder to explain. something that was built to bring comfort, but instead learned something else entirely. And what it learned was never fully contained. And this was only the beginning. Next time, we look at the first prototype that was never officially logged into the system, and why its name was removed from every record in the building.